Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virtual Planning and Development Management Committee. Today is 16th of February 2022. Hopefully, possibly, this might be the last virtual one. We don't know what's happening, but for the moment, we're still in a virtual meeting. So welcome, everybody, and to anyone watching and listening at home. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to introduce the top table, and then we'll go on to apologies if there are any. So the top table is my Vice Convener, Councillor Bob Braun. From the planning team, we've got Mr. Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mrs. Anne Conliffe, Team Leader, Mr. Sean Panton is an Interim Team Leader. From Legal Services, we have Mr. Jeff Fogg, and from the Committee Services, Mr. Danny Williams. Danny, do we have any apologies or substitutions today, please?
Just one substitution today, Convener. We've got Councillor Robertson. He's attending in place of Councillor Barnacle, who's submitted apologies.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit of housekeeping as usual. Members, you are reminded that if you have to leave the meeting at any point, or if your internet connection is disrupted in any way, then you may not be able to participate in any vote that might come up, depending on how much of the meeting you actually missed. That is down to yourself to work out, basically, but unfortunately, if that's the case and you feel that you have missed too much of the meeting, then you will have to remove yourself from any votes. Alternatively, if you feel equally that you've heard enough, then I'm happy for you to participate, but could you in any way please let the clerk know in the meeting chat that if you missed any part of the meeting. Again, we're well used to this by now, but if you could use the chat function to attract my attention. I barely have anybody's face on the screen, so hands up or any boxes like that do not work for me. So please put Q for question or anything that you want to put in there, please, in the chat. We're well versed on it by now. And Mr. Williams, I'm going to ask you now to do a roll call so that we can proceed on to declarations of interest. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Convener. So, members, as usual, when I call your name, if you can let me know whether you're in attendance. Councillor Braun.
Present.
Councillor Brock.
Present.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Councillor Illingworth.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Convener, we've heard from yourself, so Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
Councillor Waters.
Present.
Councillor Williamson.
Present.
Councillor Wilson.
Present.
And Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Okay, thank you very much, members. Convener, that should be everyone in attendance who's meant to be.
Thank you very much. I would also like to state that my apologies to Sean again. I did this last month when I didn't give him his title as interim team leader, and now this month I've given him the title of interim team leader, and he's been promoted already, and he is now an actual team leader. So my apologies to you there, Sean, and congratulations on the swift promotion. Well done. Okay, on to the next item, which is declarations of interest. Committee, could you put a DI into the chat box, please, if you have a declaration of interest on today's proceedings. If there's nothing coming up, I will swiftly move on. Okay, thank you. We have a deputation request today, deputations on application 521. Can I ask the committee if they are in agreement to hear these deputations?
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you, committee. And the minutes of the meeting of the Planning and Development Management Committee of the 19th of January, can I ask that you agree that these are an accurate reflection of the meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, committee. So that brings us swiftly on to today's applications, and the first application in front of us, 511. It's S42 application to delete condition 3, Broxton traffic assessment of permission, which was granted on 19/02/033 IPM on land south of Target House, Ruffenfield Road, Inverarmond Industrial Estate in Perth. And I would like to ask Mr. Smith to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Now, firstly, I'll summarise the situation and purpose of the application. So as said, the application seeks to delete condition 3 of the parent planning permission in principle. That condition sees a standard ongoing requirement of each future related MSC or matter specified in the conditions application to submit information assessing the potential impact on the safe and efficient operation of the A9 Broxton roundabout. Such information submitted then to be passed to Transport Scotland for consideration and comment as the relevant statutory consultee. This conditional requirement was applied to the planning permission in principle as at the time the applicant had not provided sufficient assessment to satisfy Transport Scotland on the nature and extent of any impacts, and as a result Transport Scotland required that the condition be applied so as to reserve their position. However, information has now been provided to Transport Scotland, the roads authority responsible for Broxton roundabout, which satisfies them that the impacts associated to the development are not significant and do not require mitigation. As such, they now advise that they no longer require the planning condition to be applied to the planning permission in principle, and then in turn that information would not require to be provided with each and every subsequent matter specified in conditions application. So I'll now take you through some slides which seek to illustrate the location and indicative layout of how the site may be developed, and also the distance to the Broxton roundabout, all to paint the picture of the context. This first image is an aerial photograph highlighting in red the location of the site. As can be seen, the existing parts of Inveralmond are to the north and east, while to the west is the link road between Perth and the A9 and then up towards Bertha Park. The roundabout, which would also provide an access to the Almond Valley Village that we saw at committee a number of months ago, is to the northwest. Next image, please. The second slide shows, have we got that up yet? Yeah, here we go. Second slide shows the extents of the site outlined in red with some of the existing landmarks I mentioned earlier evident. Next image, please. This third slide illustrates the potential layout, which, although not approved, gives an impression of the potential roads and footways, as well as plot sizes and configurations. Our final slide, please. Here we move to an expanded satellite image, which shows the site again identified in red, together with the Broxton roundabout highlighted some distance to the south. Thank you, convener. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for coming in swiftly with your question. I'm opening up to questions for officers. And Councillor Wilson, please come forward with your questions, then on to Councillor Simpson. Thank you.
Thanks, convener. I wouldn't ask a rhetorical question, but I'll refer to the paper first of all, convener. Page 11, para 40. The applicant, after discussions with Transport Scotland, have we had any copies of the correspondence that went between the two of them to make our own views and assessment?
I can answer that, certainly. Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for your question. Yes, we have, and we also asked Transport Scotland if they would like to attend today's meeting, which they declined, but in response to that, they did provide quite an extensive retort as to their position, but their position is that they are of the view that, having had a lot of information back and forward between them and the applicants, that they are confident that the impacts of this development are not significant and do not require mitigation. So yes, we do have information passed back and forward.
Convener, I'm grateful for the answer. Could I ask a supplementary? Do we know what the impacts were? Just in summary terms.
Is that possible, Mr. Smith? Is there any chance, or yourself or Lachlan maybe, who could give a quick summary on that? I think it would be.
Yeah, I think I can cover that. In very general terms, the extent of traffic that would be related to this development is very, very small in terms of the overall volumes that utilise the Broxton roundabout, to such an extent that the change that would result is very, very small and not requiring of mitigation in Transport Scotland's view.
Thanks, convener, for these very professional responses. I may reserve my right to comment later on.
And I would welcome that. Thank you. Councillor Simpson, your question, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Convener. On a similar vein to Councillor Wilson, I wonder if I might ask if officers have a comment as to whether we are to understand from the interaction with Transport Scotland that they are content with the way in which Broxden Roundabout operates at present. I can see from your face, Convener, you have the misfortune of having to use it on a regular basis, as do I in my trips to Dunblane, and it's generally considered to be a basket case roundabout and an example of how not to do it to everyone throughout the world. And I'm just quite surprised to see that Transport Scotland think everything's all right, or am I perhaps reading too much into this?
Thank you, and certainly I understand where your question is coming from, and we'll pass it on to Mr. Smith to answer. I just wanted to state that we are looking at this from the this particular application, but I totally understand where your question is coming from. Mr. Smith, could you answer that, please?
I think you've largely covered it, Convener. What the discussion back and forward in relation to this planning application between the applicant and Transport Scotland has looked at is the impact of this development in isolation, and not whether or not there are issues in a wider sense with the Broxden roundabout. But as I think I said in my presentation, Transport Scotland are the roads authority responsible for Broxden roundabout, not Perth and Kinross Council.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, your question, please.
Thank you, Convener. I think my question's really just been answered by Mr. Smith there, and it was more just around has the council done any work at all to look at the flow of traffic around the area when it done all its traffic modelling for the Perth area, and was this site actually considered in it? But I think his answer on it's the Transport Scotland's responsibility may be the answer to that, but if there is anything to add in there, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. Mr. Smith, you coming back in with an answer, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Councillor, for your question there. I think there are really two parts to that. One is the trunk road network, which is the responsibility of Transport Scotland, and secondly the local road network, which is the responsibility of Perth and Kinross Council as the roads authority, and both those elements have been considered in relation to this application. And if you're aware of the further conditions applied to the planning permission in principle, there are conditions relating to local road network issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, may I just ask if there are any further questions?
Has Convener dropped out? The Convener's dropped out for a second.
I think the Convener's frozen. I thought I was frozen, but I think the Convener's.
Yeah, sorry members, I think, yeah, it's just a case that Councillor McCall has unfortunately encountered a bit of a technology issue there. It's just frozen. So if we just want to just give her a second to, I think she's just left the meeting.
Yeah.
So I just want to give her a couple of minutes just to
see if she comes back in. Yeah. Okay.
Is that okay with you, Councillor Brown?
Yep. Just give her a chance to get back in. If not, I'll have to take over. She's back.
My apologies, everybody. I am so sorry. I have been suffering internet issues for nearly 2 weeks now, and for some unknown reason, I'll be merrily chatting away, and then the internet will just disconnect from my computer entirely, and I'll go offline, and then I reconnect and I'm back, and I have no idea why. So my extreme apologies, everybody, for their mid-sentence, or I was going to move the paper, but I see a whole load of other people are coming in to do that. Okay, give me a second. Right, here we go. I was going to move the paper, but Councillor James, I see you have come in with an M. So if you're happy to do so, I will defer to yourself.
Thanks, convener. I did that because it went very quiet, and I thought, oh, but anyway, here we are. Yes, I'm happy to move the paper as it is. To be honest, looking through the papers, Transport Scotland were the ones that asked for this condition in the first place, and now they have no problem with it. So, you know, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Quite happy to let this one go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, you have put forward to move the paper, but are you happy to second?
Yes, quite happy to second. Mr. Smith adequately explained exactly the reasoning. The traffic generated from this site will be relatively inconsequential with respect to the traffic coming down the A9. And for those who really think that the Broxden roundabout is particularly hopeless or inadequate, then they really should consider the one down at Keir roundabout, which is the beginning of the A9, which has traffic jams every bit as bad as the one at Broxden. So really it's a relative thing. It's traffic on the roads. We all use it. We all require it. And we've got to live with it to some extent. I'm quite sure in the future these both will be improved. Happy to second.
Thank you very much indeed. Do we have an amendment? Okay, there's no amendment, but we do have some comments from councillors, and I'm happy to do that. So first was Councillor Wilson, then we have Councillor Robertson, and then Councillor Lewis. Councillor Wilson, your comment, please.
Thanks, convener. I don't. There's no locus for putting in an amendment, but I couldn't possibly let this opportunity go by without making a comment, convener. And it is germane to the business we've got before us, because this Transport Scotland was correct and asked for this condition, and now they seem to be walking away from it. I could say that Transport Scotland live in a parallel universe, and to answer Tom Gray's point, I'm very familiar with the Keir roundabout. That doesn't help us at Broxden, and neither of these situations are happy ones. There's a responsibility, and I want to thank Mr. Smith for his succinct, factual summary of who's responsible for what. This is Transport Scotland, Scottish Government responsibility. And the last time I wrote to Transport Scotland asking them what they were doing about plans for improvement, they basically said that we've no money and it'll all be down to developer contributions and the council. That's an inadequate, pathetic answer. The question, though, that's particularly relevant to this paper, convener, is that we've got one application. What happens about the accumulation of applications? Because there will be others that will relate to housing, commercial developments such as this, and so on and so forth. And how are they to be considered? Are Transport Scotland doing anything at all to look at the cumulative situation? Everybody in the room knows there's a problem here. Everybody in the room knows what the solutions are. And just to answer one more point about have our road staff helped at all in this. They have shared information where it's appropriate and relevant with Transport Scotland to aid their studies there, because some of there's an, as you will understand, convener, there's an overlap in the information. Our traffic flow information has been shared where appropriate with Transport Scotland, who have sat on it and done nothing about it. It's quite unfortunate, is the politest term I'll use, that we've got into this situation, and it's high time Transport Scotland and their political masters got a grip of this and did something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Robertson, you're next, and then Councillor Simpson.
Yes, I would agree entirely with what Councillor Wilson has just said. It's strange that we're sitting in a planning and development committee. Planning is about looking to the future and taking decisions which actually improve things and don't make things worse. And a thing like Broxden, it's the incremental development sometimes small, sometimes large, that continually adds to the pressures on it, and it makes for huge tailbacks. This is just another small or a medium-sized incremental development, which will have will add to the traffic flows at Broxden. I despair of Transport Scotland. When it was such a major part of our infrastructure here in Perth and Kinross at Broxden, I'm surprised and disappointed that they didn't feel that they should attend this meeting. And it's a virtual meeting, so they could quite easily have sat in it and given their views on the whole situation. It's treating the whole thing with almost like contempt. So I'm very, very disappointed with the way Transport Scotland are actually dealing with things like this. And as Councillor Wilson says, just washes their hands of it and says up to somebody else to sort it out. Well, it isn't. It's their responsibility. And I would have liked them to come to the table this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. I've spent the last 20 years trying to get in ahead of Councillor Wilson and Councillor Robertson, so there's still something left to be said, and I failed this morning, so I would simply say that I agree absolutely with both every word and the sentiments they've expressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor McEwen, do you wish to make that as a comment, or are you just putting that in the chat?
I'm sure the officers can read that chat and email me back. I think that would be sufficient.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thanks, Convener. Just to say, I too can agree completely with Councillor Wilson, and it sticks in the throat a wee bit when you read that the impact that the development would have on, and I quote, the safe and efficient operation of the A9 Broxton roundabout. Well, if there's one thing that is not efficient and safe, is the Broxton roundabout. And I agree that Transport Scotland are a disgraceful organisation.
Thank you very much. And yes, I see that officers are getting in touch on the chat, but equally we'll get in touch with you directly, Councillor McEwen, regarding your question. Thank you very much indeed. I do have one small comment. If we are within our rights to make a comment, certainly in other ones regarding NHS Tayside, which I have on record and being concerned about that, we're certainly within our rights as a planning authority to make comment regarding Transport Scotland. There is a massive amount of development within Perth and Kinross. It is something that is encouraged. It's something that I personally am encouraging. It is the way forward to increase Perth and Kinross. It is a way forward to increase investment. It is a way forward to look at businesses coming into the area. It is certainly something that I applaud, and I encourage. But we need the infrastructure. Infrastructure first is something I've been shouting about for 5 years. The infrastructure on all parties needs to come forward, and I seriously believe that Transport Scotland are well behind the curve on this, and they equally need to look at themselves. So I agree wholeheartedly with the comments that have been made, and thank you very much indeed. We will move on to the next application. Okay, thank you. Right, local applications next. So we are at 521, which is the part change of use from an agricultural building to form stables, the siting of a temporary caravan, 2 camping pod/holiday accommodation units, and formation of equestrian centre comprising of an outdoor riding arena, boundary treatments and associated works in part retrospect on land northeast of Garden Cottages in Dunkeld. And Mrs. Conliffe, would you please speak to the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I was just waiting for the screen to change to show this application before I started. If you just give it a second. There we go. Yes, members, as the convener has indicated, the proposal is for the part change of use from agricultural building to form stables, the siting of a temporary caravan, 2 camping pods for holiday accommodation units, and the formation of an equestrian centre comprising an outdoor riding arena, boundary treatments and associated works, all at a site northeast of Newtile, Dunkeld. Next slide, please. Yes, members, as the convener has indicated, the proposal is for the part change of use from agricultural building to form. This aerial photo, the application site you'll see is marked in red with the access from the site to the public road. The location of the site is east of Dunkeld, which has been delineated on the photo, as is the A9 to the south to allow you to get your bearings. The site is extensive and is located approximately 2 kilometres from the junction with the public road, which is the A984 at Newtile. You can see the A984 where the red line on the slide ends, and this road goes from Dunkeld over to Capeth and beyond towards Cooperangus. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site layout, and it shows the general layout of the proposal. Hopefully you can see the letters that are on this. You've got item A, which is a blue hatched on the plan, and that's the existing Dutch barn agricultural building, which accommodates the 6 stables. B, which is hatched black on the plan, is the bothy building to be converted for holiday accommodation as a camping pod, located immediately adjacent to the barn. C, which is hatched red on the plan, provides a hard standing for parking, turning and accommodation for the horse boxes. D, which is red lined on the plan, is the equestrian arena. E, which is the green lined on the plan, provides the landscaping of the site, which is substantial in form. This is currently in existence and creates a landscape backdrop for the site from the south, albeit that it is at a lower level than the buildings, which you can clearly see from the contours. And finally, F, which is located east of the barn, is the new camping pod, and just south of that is the proposed site for the current unauthorised caravan belonging to the applicant. New landscaping is proposed around the caravan and the existing caravan site, including hard standing is shown dotted on this plan to be removed, then topsoil and reseeded for grazing. Next slide, please. This layout shows all the elements of what I described in the previous slide, with the same layout plan retained on the left-hand side of the screen. Below this layout are the details of the caravan currently on site, which will be located to the northeast to read better with the existing buildings. The central diagram at the top of the screen details the new landscaping around the revised position for the caravan and camping pod. To the right of the screen, at the top, you can see the various elevations of the existing agricultural building, which will accommodate the stables inside, as well as storage areas for the equine business. Below the elevations, you can see the layout of the 6 stables within the barn, with the tack rooms in separate buildings to the west of the barn, and the change of use of the existing bothy to camping pod to the east of the barn. And finally, at the bottom right of the screen, you can see the proposed horsebox camping pod. Next slide, please. I'm now moving to a series of recent photos which will show the various elements of the proposal I've just described, as well as the landscape context of the site. This first photo is taken from the A984 Dunkeld to Capeth Road. The entrance to the site at Newtile is just where you see the blue car passing. Next slide, please. This photo is taken from the entrance that we saw in the previous slide and is the start of the private access which leads to the site. The site is approximately 1.2 miles, about 2 kilometres from this point, and the road is surfaced the whole way with passing places throughout, with some areas better than others in terms of condition. For the distance to the site, there are a number of residential properties and farms which take access from this route. Some are located close to the access and others some distance away. Next slide, please. This photo is taken from that access, looking eastwards towards the site where you can see the agricultural building, which is the main hub of activities. But before that, the arena area is on the right. On the far right of the screen, you will see the unauthorised caravan, which is proposed to now be located as part of the proposal nearer to existing buildings. Next slide, please. This photo is taken a little further up the track and shows the vehicular access to the site with the 2 tack rooms on the western gable of the building. Next slide, please. This photo is from the south of the barn and shows the stables as currently formed within the barn. Next slide, please. And this final photo is looking at the overall site, this time from the east. The caravan is on the brow of the hill to the south, to the left of the screen, but it's proposed to be located down beside the horse box you see in timber in the centre of the screen, which will become a camping pod. The barn is clearly visible with the bothy building on its eastern gable. This will be converted to the second camping pod. Thank you, Convener. That concludes the slides and the presentation, and we'll return to the site layout.
Thank you, Mrs. Conliffe. Thank you for the presentation. We have deputations for this application. The first deputation is Mr. Douglas Brown. Mr. Brown, are you with us? Are you online? If you phoned in, Mr. Brown, could you please? I'm trying to remember. Is it *6?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir. Hello, Mr. Brown. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much. There is a process to this, if that's okay, Mr. Brown. What will happen is I'll pass you on to the Vice Convener, Councillor Braun, who will give you a brief idea of the timings and what have you and what happens next. And then when that's done and you finish, you'll come back to me. So over to Councillor Braun. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Mr. Brown, can you hear me all right?
I can.
Fine. Okay. Now you have up to 10 minutes to make your deputation. If you get to the 9-minute mark, I will interrupt you and warn you have 1 minute left to go. But if you're happy with that, when I next hear you speak, I will start the clock. So over to you.
Okay. Thanks very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'll be well within the time limit because I'm just going to read this statement. I think it's the most efficient way to do it. As the convener said, my name is Douglas Brown, and I wish to make this deputation objecting to the recommended approval of this controversial application relating to change of use of an agricultural site on the Dungarthal estate at Dunkeld. I was one of the 34 objectors to the proposal, and like all other objectors, I am a resident on the estate. I think it should be noted here that none of the 63 supporters of the original proposal is a local resident living on the estate. And I think furthermore, the objectors also include the local landowners who the applicant states she has a strong collaborative business relationship with. There's a large amount of information in the report by the Head of Planning and Development justifying detailed elements of this proposal, but along with my neighbours, my objection to this application is in principle. The applicant's plans for a rural equine business are laudable, and there may indeed be a market for the enterprise. However, this site is neither suitable nor appropriate to support the activities proposed. The Head of Planning and Development has acknowledged that because the site is not located within the settlement boundary, it fails to comply with the development plan, specifically Policy 1 of TAY Plan and Policy 6 of LDB 2. The recommendation to approve the change of use references very limited exceptions outlined in Policy 8, which state that the development of sites out with settlements may be acceptable where they offer opportunities to diversify an existing rural business or are related to existing site-specific resources or opportunities. In this case, there is no existing business to diversify, and I would challenge that the site does not adequately demonstrate that it presents a site-specific resource or opportunity for the creation of an equestrian business. Indeed, it has fundamental shortcomings. The proposal outlines an interesting business opportunity, but on a site that does not support it at many levels. It's the wrong site, not the wrong business. The applicant has stated that the proposed equestrian business has a prerequisite requirement for year-round 24/7 on-site supervision. Therefore, the principal site-specific resource required for this proposed use is residential accommodation, which has existed in some form on all other similar applications approved in recent years. There is no residential accommodation on this site. The requirement for caravan accommodation is the temporary solution to this deficiency, but the planning report anticipates that a further planning application for a new house will be forthcoming in due course to support the business when and if it becomes established. Having already submitted and withdrawn an application for a new dwelling house on this agricultural site, this has clearly been the applicant's strategy from the outset. Access to the development site is completely inadequate for the uses proposed. Regular daily access to the site will be required by clients driving horse vehicles and towing horse boxes. The single track road has recently been repaired, but not upgraded, and that has not changed its form, length, or character. The track does not have frequent passing places other than the entrances to fields. If two vehicles were to meet head-on, as they undoubtedly will, then a horse box or trailer will require to make blind reverse maneuvers several hundred yards up a narrow inclined track, having a ditch on one side and a slope on the other. There will inevitably be serious accidents or damage to vehicles or property. Roads and Highways have confirmed that the junction between the track and the old military road is adequate. However, they are not authorised to make a judgment on the adequacy of access across a private road. The road owners and users have made their views very clear through their objections that they absolutely do not consider road access to be acceptable or safe for the uses proposed. Finally, in addition to poor access and the lack of a necessary site-specific resource, this site has no water, surely a key requirement for an equestrian business. The informatives clause within the planning report states that the applicant shall ensure the private water supply for the dwelling house / development complies with a whole raft of water regulations. This clause has no relevance whatsoever. There is no proposed dwelling house, and the applicant's title deeds preclude her from using the private water supply for any commercial purposes. The applicant's title deeds allow her to make connection to the Mill of Muckley borehole for residential purposes only. Currently, the applicant has no residential permission, but she has already made a water connection, which, regardless of what she says, she uses for her horses as well as the caravan and the holiday accommodation. The drilling company has warned us that there is a serious risk of contamination to our drinking water supply through back siphonage and a breaching of our statutory firefighting obligations in relation to our mandatory underground water storage. All of this was stated in our various objections. The 2016 and 2019 deeds of conditions which apply to this site regulation all the services for the various properties and specify the obligations in relation to the borehole, including the residential only restriction. Currently, the applicant is not complying with the terms of her title deeds, and should she continue to use the private water supply for her commercial equine business or visitor accommodation, we are advised that the Muckley owners can take action against her. The planning report stresses that the water issue is a private matter. However, in this case, I would challenge that access to water for consumption and cleaning is fundamental to the viability of the applicant's proposed business and to the welfare of her own and her clients' animals. So I would argue that it is material to the principle of development in this case. The use of grey water from the burn or rainwater, as is proposed by the applicant, is not a healthy, reliable, or sustainable alternative source. The remaining site-specific value justifying compliance with Policy 8 is therefore very marginal and limited to the reuse of the old Dutch barn, which, in the absence of any plan to restore or improve this from its current condition, provides extremely substandard stabling accommodation. I would be highly supportive of such a proposal in the countryside on the right site, but this is not the right site. It has no water, no existing necessary residential accommodation, and questionable and potentially dangerous access. Furthermore, it is a site located between 3 active shooting estates, so about the least appropriate place to accommodate flight animals. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. I'll pass you back now to the convener.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you very much indeed for your presentation there. Are you happy that the committee asked you some questions?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. We have a couple coming forward already. Councillor Gray, you have a question for Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown, I want to focus on the access, which seemed to concern many people. There are 34 objectors up this road. Are they all farm workers? I gather there's farms up there. How many of them are farm workers?
I couldn't tell you the exact number. Certainly, Drum Tenant Farm is an active farm, and there are workers associated with that. But there are also a number of residents from the various cottages and farm buildings and redeveloped steadings all the way up to Mill of Muckley and beyond.
Redeveloped steadings. So presumably these are houses not associated with the farm anymore. They're simply private residences. Do you think then that developing a steading up this road is any worse than having one business up this road? And remembering that there are farms which are serviced by this track, which themselves must create problems for traffic, etc. on the road. Therefore, why is this one business any more limiting to the accessibility of the road than the existing farm businesses and all the houses which have been developed up there?
The residents of the existing houses and the farms and the farm workers use the road to access their properties for private residential access and to operate their farms. There are no other commercial businesses up this single track road, and a commercial business, which is one that clearly will generate significant at the applicant's own admittance, significant daily use by clients multiple times a day, sometimes with horse vehicles and sometimes not, as well as regular events which can generate up to 40 or 50 attending vehicles, including many horse boxes and horse trailers. It's just simply not appropriate, both in terms of risk and danger, but also inconvenience to the existing residents of the estate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We also have Councillor Simpson who wishes to ask a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your deputation, which I found most helpful. I am familiar with this road, and I say unfortunately, at least from the point of view of my car, I'm familiar with this road, having been up and down it on local review body business to Mill of Muckley and beyond. And I'm interested to hear again a bit more from you about the road. I was struck when I was up there how relatively busy a place it seemed to be in terms of construction traffic, delivery of building materials and other matters. And certainly back in, I think it was November, I spent as much time reversing and trying to avoid ditches and so on into, as you say, passing places which are not really passing places, but mostly just field entrances and so on. How would you describe the surface of this road for those of us that haven't seen it?
I mean, it's basically an unmade up farm track. Last year, all of the residents, in fact, except the applicant, met their legal obligation to upgrade this road, not to upgrade it, but to repair it. So there was some new crushed rock put in several places. There was some tar planings rolled into other places. But this is seen as an ongoing repair and maintenance issue for all of the local residents. It's not an adopted road. We all have our obligations to keep it in reasonable repair. So it has been repaired in the last year. But if you've been up recently, you'll already see that it is starting to deteriorate again. It doesn't have sufficient base to have a long-term solution. So it will always be, a sort of annual or biannual maintenance regime on that road. I mean, the real issue is more to do with just the access to the site of large vehicles, including horse boxes. You've said yourself you've had to reverse down the road. Now, if you could imagine that being a horse and trailer or a horse box reversing up and down a completely blind, twisty, and in some places precipitous farm track, It's just and you know what I think they said it was 2 miles or 2 kilometers from the entrance to the main military road. It's just a completely inappropriate site for this sort of use, which would require the sort of access that the applicant is highlighting.
Thank you. We have no further questions from but I would like to ask a couple of questions, if I may, Mr. Brown. Firstly, the water issue, and you have very eloquently put across your concerns as to why this should be taken into consideration in planning. But it certainly does read as if this is a concerning issue regarding the legal position between the usage of the fresh water for all the residents there and the applicant. So are you progressing as residents with a legal challenge through a legal process?
We were waiting until the outcome of the planning process. As you know, this has been quite a protracted process going on from last April. And we've been holding on until the application was finally determined, until we and actually how the applicant dealt with the aftermath of that before we actually instigated any further action. We've written formally to the applicant with certain questions about where she has made the water connection, because no one knows, and insisting that she does not use the water for any of her commercial purposes. But we received no reply to that letter, despite requesting a response.
Okay, but it is your intention as local residents to move forward with a legal challenge?
I think we would have a meeting and we would take a view, depending on the outcome of this application. Obviously, that's a process that will require all of us to commit to starting to spend money on the matter.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to. I know that I'm asking a question. What I have in my mind is this is a situation that is happening now. This is a situation that is happening as per your deputation, that there is a concern regarding as it is being run right now, rather than as it will be run. Yes, there is a knock-on effect, but there is a concern right now, and I'm just trying to balance the concern that you're stating in your deputation versus what will happen with planning. So at the moment, you're not seeing this as a concern, even though there has been a connection that you're saying allegedly it goes against the terms and conditions stated within the land. But more important, depending on the outcome of this application.
No, there is a current concern. I mean, the situation is that because the applicant currently has no residential permission on that site, she has actually made a clandestine connection to the supply. Therefore, at this point in time, we would be able to challenge her having made that access. But,
okay. But you've chosen not to.
If the application is successful, then the caravan will establish some residential rights. So it will only be the commercial aspect that we will be able to challenge. Okay,
thank you. And there was another question, but I didn't write it down and I forgot. Don't worry, I'm sure it'll come back to me at a later stage. My apologies for that. But thank you very much indeed for your information. There are no more questions coming forward, Mr. Brown. So I appreciate you giving up your time today to talk to us, and thank you for making a deputation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We also have the applicant willing to make a deputation. So, Ms. Karen Inkster, are you hearing us? Are you there? Ms. Inkster? Hello?
Oh, I've just been unmuted, so hopefully you can hear me now.
We can indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Ms. Karen Inkster. Hello. Thank you very much indeed for coming along. Same process as was for Mr. Brown. I'm going to pass you straight over to the Vice Convener, Councillor Braun, who will go through the timing side of it. And then once you've done your deputation, you'll come back to me. And again, if you're happy, we'll have some questions from councillors. So over to Councillor Braun.
Thanks, convener. Ms. Inkster, can you hear me all right?
I can, thank you.
Fine. Okay. Now, just as before, you have up to 10 minutes to make your deputation. If we do get to the 9-minute mark, I will interrupt you and say you have a minute left as a warning that you're running out of time. But if you're happy with that, what I will do is start the clock when I next hear you speak.
Thank you very much, convener and councillors, for giving me the time and the opportunity to speak. And thanks both to John Williamson, the planning officer, and also the head of planning for their comprehensive report that they've put together. So I just wanted to give some background information as to the reason behind many of the objections. As noted in the report, Dungarthal Estate was sold off in sections in 2020. Horses have actually been on the estate for many, many years. One local resident who was employed on the estate for nearly 20 years confirms that horses have been on the estate for all that time. Indeed, the fields adjacent to mine had horses in it. And when I purchased the land, the Dutch barn was actually already used as stables when I purchased it in 2020. I've actually resided on the estate for longer than I've owned the land, and it used to be absolute paradise. Everybody knew each other and everybody looked out for each other. Sadly, the beautiful old stone byres, some cottages, stables and cattle pens, etc. were all razed to the ground to make way for 9 new executive builds. These builds are of considerable size and have impacted the land considerably. New people started to come and go in relation to the building plots. Some came and visited me with their grandchildren and met my ponies. Some asked for lessons. Some got their fancy cars stuck in fields and asked me to pull them out with my pickup. And some came and asked to use my water supply for many months when they themselves were living in a caravan, which they still are. All of which I obliged to. And last winter, my JCB was used to clear snow from the private roads and to clear driveways for residents at no cost to anybody. Unfortunately, things changed dramatically when this plan application was submitted. One of the new residents, who has been down and visited my ponies and asked for lessons, chose to email all of the residents, most of which aren't even in residence here yet. They still just own building plots. And he asked that they all oppose the planning application. This led to what can only be described as a witch hunt. Another resident put together proposed wording and bullet points and sent to other residents to use for their objections. Unfortunately, much of this information was wrong and misleading. More unfortunately, it was that one resident actually contacted me, only one resident, contacted me to ask me if the information that had been shared was actually factual. The rest, unfortunately, just made assumptions, and the information that was wrong and misleading seems to be being interpreted as factual. This round-robin email between residents became very vicious, and a campaign was launched to try and prevent my application from proceeding. As a result of this campaign and witch hunt, the intimidation over the last 10 months has resulted in police attendance on a number of occasions. My sheds have been broken into, yet nothing was stolen. All my power tools, strimmers, generators, etc. were all left in situ. Gates to the horses' fields have been opened during the night in an attempt to let the horses out into the road. Business signs have been removed and stolen, and I have received verbal abuse telling me that I should have a dog collar round my neck. All of these incidents have been recorded by the police as intimidation. The effect this has had on my mental health has been almost overwhelming. I could not in my wildest dreams have expected this level of intimidation over a simple planning application. At the end of the day, I'm not building anything new. The Dutch barn and the bothy were ready in situ, and the caravan is temporary accommodation to allow me to get my business set up and developed. The original planning application was for a small off-grid single-storey 2-bedroomed straw build eco house and the business application. In consultation with Perth and Kinross, they asked that I remove the residential part of the planning application and establish the business for 2 years and then put in for the planning application for the house, as they did not want to agree to a house and then the business not be suitable and justifiable. The water, which seems to be causing many issues and unfortunately is very misleading. Water is contained in 2 huge IBC tanks from the Dutch barn, so that's collected by rainwater, which provides all water to the stables. And there is a very simple pump and battery, because the whole facilities are off-grid. So the pump and battery pumps water from the stream to the horses' fields. Grey water or whatever water from streams and things is perfectly adequate for horses drinking water. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. Water for the 2 glamping pods is purchased, and butts, which are just small, kind of, I don't know, 5-10 litre butts, are in the glamping pods, and again, they're run off a very simple battery pump to provide water into the sinks. The connection to the borehole was all part of the missives in terms of when I bought the land back in 2020. The connection was made by a local company, all completely above board and done properly and professionally. And there is no concerns at all by the company that installed it, that there is any contamination of anything, and was all done correctly, and provides water only to 1 outside tap and the temporary caravan. In relation to the roads, the 9 new executive builds, some of which are up to 7 bedrooms, have music rooms, piano rooms, etc., have resulted in massive construction vehicles up to 60 tonnes at a time, delivering everything from cement to roof trusses, etc. One day alone, I've seen up to 22 cement mixers for 1 property alone. So the allegation that the road cannot stand the number of vehicles, the kind of number of vehicles passing, etc., in my opinion, is completely and utterly irrelevant. The equestrian facilities is very small. People who have horses pay for them to be kept often, so they don't visit every day. I've planned for 1 event a year, and the other kind of courses and facilities will have a maximum of maybe 10 cars, and there maybe be up to 4 of those a year, I think I've kind of guesstimated. So there is actually very, very little impact on the roads at all, and it's actually insignificant in the current situation of the 9 new executive builds and the construction traffic in relation to them. And can I just state that the allegation that I did not contribute to the road repairs last year is completely infactual. The contribution was made by all of the residents bar 1, and that was not me. Just looking at the T plan and the local development plan, I'm not going to reiterate what is included in the 22-page report, which supports them all, but basically I'm allowing for the provision of permanent local employment, providing visitor accommodation, creating a tourism and recreational facility, reusing existing buildings, supporting economic development, providing off-grid, low-carbon and environmentally friendly development, supporting the local community, and it is site-specific need by virtue of quality or location. There is a definite need in the equestrian world for more positive natural horsemanship training and facilities, and what I offer is quite unique, and there is a massive evolution happening within the equestrian world to promote a more fairer training of horses. So I thank you all for your time and allowing me to offer an insight as to the background of the objections, and I hope that the report demonstrates that my application addresses many of the T plan and local development plan policies and will be a positive development to Perth and Kinross. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll pass you back to the convener.
Ms Inkster, thank you very much indeed for your deputation. There's a couple of questions coming forward. Are you happy to have questions from the councillors?
Yes, of course, thank you.
Thank you. The first one that came up was Councillor Simpson and then to Councillor Wilson. Councillor Simpson, your question, please.
Thank you, convener, and thank you, Ms Inkster, for your interesting deputation. We'll all be particularly sorry to hear about the instances of bullying and intimidation. I have first-hand experience of this myself, sadly, in the course of the last year, and it's a very debilitating and upsetting experience. But my question relates once again to the road, and the fact that I have been up there myself and was again struck by the fairly extensive amount of construction going on. would it be your contention that when that construction is over, the amount of traffic in the road will be much less?
I would say probably about 95% less.
Yeah, right. So if I just might ask a supplementary then, Kaveen, if
certainly, absolutely, yes, please do.
Would you say in a rough percentage term, how much of the traffic once the construction is done would be related to your business, and how much would be, I assume, the commuting from the large houses being built further up the road?
Given the scale of the executive houses and the other houses that are already in situ, relation to the kind of original cottages, you know, they're very large houses, 5 bedrooms, you know, sons, daughters, grandchildren, people visiting all these 9 new houses and the existing houses. I would say traffic in relation to my business would maybe equate to less than 10% of the traffic that's going to be up and down the road.
Thank you very much, Gavina. Thank you, Ms. Inser.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and then Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener, and Ms. Inkster, thanks for your presentation. I just want to dwell for a moment or two on the traffic situation. The horse boxes that will come, or vehicles with trailers, and I caveat my question with telling you I'm not a driver, okay, because otherwise the other members of the committee will tell you that. How easy or how difficult is it to negotiate, say a car or a Land Rover and a trailer on what is a one-track road if you meet somebody coming the other way, especially if you've got a towed vehicle rather than a single vehicle? And have you had any instances of problems like that? And do you think there are adequate passing places, albeit some of them are quasi-passing places where there's entrances? And are there any opportunities for these to be improved? And have you signed up, even tacitly, to being part of the road improvement, regular maintenance improvement consortium, if I can call it that? I know there's a lot of questions in there, but I think they're important ones, and they were raised by the objector in a factual sort of manner. So I'd be happy to have some responses, please.
Yeah, I suppose it's a difficult question because it depends on your own driving ability. So I guess one of the points is that many of the courses that are run don't actually involve horses. So, for example, the barefoot trimming course, we actually work on what you call cadaver hoofs, so dead horse hoofs. So you learn to trim on those. You don't actually have horses there. And likewise, the behavioural courses that are run, the people who run the courses use my horses. So it's very misleading to assume that every course or event will actually have horse boxes in attendance. And likewise, liveries, not everybody has the opportunity to own a horse box. And the kind of facilities that are offered here, which is the great hacking, means that you can still enjoy having a horse without actually needing to take it elsewhere. So the road was remarkably improved last year because it had been so badly damaged by the construction vehicles involved in the building of the 9 new executive houses. Prior to that, the road had been fine. There's actually 3 residents within the estate that have horses and horse boxes themselves, and we've managed for years going up and down the estate. So along with the improvements to the physical kind of level and potholes and things that were there, there's a number of passing places actually being put in. So it's not just field entrances. There's a number of very large passing places that were actually kind of scooped out of the landscape and then filled with a surface because they've had to take the Arctic lorries that are coming up and down the track on a daily basis to allow them to pass. So the kind of allegation that there isn't enough space or anything to pass the odd horse box that might be coming up is irrelevant, really. You know, reversing horse boxes, people that tend to drive horse boxes and trailers, we tend to go to places that you have to be able to reverse pretty well. You wouldn't be kind of towing a trailer really if you couldn't reverse. So it's slightly kind of difficult to answer in terms of that. But sorry, was there another part, Councillor Wilson, that I've forgotten that I haven't answered?
No, I think you've covered most of it. Could I convener ask one short supplementary?
Certainly.
How many horses at any one time do you have on site?
So I own 4 of my own rescue horses, and there's 2 friends that have horses there just now. The maximum I've said is a maximum of 8 liveries. So although there is 23 acres and the kind of average is 1 acre for the first horse, then half an acre per horse after that, I don't believe that is a good environment for a horse. So although I have plenty acreage, there won't be that many horses on it because I provide such a natural environment to the horses. They need lots of space and things for their kind of for their well-being, really. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Councillor James, I see that you've said your question has now been answered. So that moves us swiftly on to Councillor Williamson. Your question, please.
Thank you, convener. I was just wondering if it's possible to let me know if there are any events that are going to be taking place, like show jumping events or such like, not knowing enough about horses, but where you would attract a large crowd going up and down the road.
No, it's not that type of equestrian centre. It's not a riding school. It's not a trekking centre. It is a very kind of unique facility in that it offers training for people on how to work better for the horses' welfare. So as I say, most of the courses won't even have horses in attendance. Last year I did host an endurance event, which isn't a paid, you're just the kind of host, not a paid event, jointly with another resident on the estate, and I think there was 37 horse boxes. It was actually quite difficult just to help organise and host. I doubt if I'll be doing another one, to be honest. The horse boxes were put into a field. There's plenty of space for them, and the yard is big enough for vehicles to turn in and things as well. So it's not the type of facility that's going to have show jumping events or dressage competitions or anything like that. It's the kind of the complete opposite of your traditional kind of British Horse Society establishment.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Ms. Inkster, there's no more questions coming forward, but I'd like to ask a question, if I may, and it follows on a little bit from that last question. You mentioned 37 horse boxes coming up. So you've got an experience now of 37. My assumption would be, and again, you'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong, that it was almost like 37 arriving in a oneer and 37 disappearing at the same time. Is my assumption correct in that? If there was any time there would be large movements, it would almost be all in, all out?
Yes and no. So at that event, I did obviously let myself and the other resident that was organising it, let all the residents know that there was going to be a number of vehicles. The event was kind of staged. So an endurance ride, you have shorter rides and longer rides. So the shorter kind of rides arrived a little bit before the other ones. But yes, predominantly they kind of arrive and go not quite en masse. So it's not like you have to close the road to allow everybody in or allow everybody out. And there are plenty of passing places to allow anybody that was coming in the opposite direction to kind of pull over and let, say, 3 or 4 horse boxes pass at one. As what happens just now when construction vehicles come, they often come in a convoy. So it'd just be similar to that.
Yes, thank you. In my mind, I had this image that a horse box would be coming in, meeting a horse box coming out, but that's not really how it kind of works. You would be ending up with a few coming in maybe cars having to pass is I guess what I'm trying to get to. But I think you've answered that. Thank you very much indeed. There are no more questions coming forward, so I appreciate you giving us a deputation. And I'd like to go on record and say that I do feel for you regarding going forward with an application and having any forms of issues towards your mental health. I'm sorry that that situation has occurred, and I just wanted to state that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so that now lends us to the next start, which is questions to officers. Sorry. So could councillors please let me know if you have any questions for our officers? Thank you. Councillor Simpson, you're first in. Your questions, please.
Thank you very much. I beat Councillor Wilson. I'm very pleased with myself. I just wonder perhaps if officers could give us a bit more information on the justification for the departure or partial departure from the local development plan. The reason I ask is that I'm constantly told at the LRB that the LRB is our Bible, and yet on this occasion we're being told that it's okay to skip some bits of it. So I think it might be helpful for us all to get a little bit more information with regard to that justification. Thank you.
Okay, interesting wording, but Mrs. Codliff, your answer, please.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yes, I mean, you would see we have put quite a lengthy part within the principle of it in the report of handling for this committee. And it is very much that clearly you have competing policies within the local plan, and the one that has been talked about was policy 1 and whether or not that completely complies with it. But one of the things that we did acknowledge was that an equestrian business normally needs to be located in a rural area. It's not going to be in the middle of a settlement to run a business such as this. So that is one of the main reasons why it is, from our opinion, reasonable to move away a bit from policy 1, but then looking very clearly at the other policies, which is primarily policy 8. Now it has a number of criteria within it, and we have gone through in the report each element of that and each criteria. And in our view, everything that has been submitted, and we have gone into a great deal of detail on this and have done with the applicant for quite some time. And our belief is that it does comply with each of the criteria of policy 8. So therefore you have to weigh the two against each other, and in our opinion we have come down on the side of it being in compliance with the local development plan. So we're not saying it's contrary to the development plan, we're saying it doesn't completely comply with policy 1 but fully complies with policy 8, and that is our assessment of it. And within part of that we also had discussions with our colleagues in economic development with regard to the justification for it, and they were quite clear in their view that it was a bit more difficult because this is a very different equine business than the normal one that we have in a number of areas of Perth and Kinross. But they were quite clear that providing the applicant knew the right market and clearly showed evidence of that this would be an ideal position within that, and Highland Perthshire particularly would be better than other parts of Perth and Kinross in terms of the tourist within that area. So all in all, we considered it did comply with the local development plan.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, you wish to make a general comment as well, please.
Yeah, just a general comment picking up on what Councillor Simpson there. It's just really to point out that the primacy of the development plan is there, but there's also the need to balance this with other material considerations, and that would include any tensions that people may feel between the general wording of different policies. So it's not a simple transactional or tick box approach that every clause of every policy must be complied with in order for a decision to be reached in any positive way. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I suppose that's why we're all here.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wilson, you're next on the list. Your questions, please.
Thank you. I thought I'd let Councillor Simpson go first for one. My question relates back to the road system. And I wonder if our planners or roads officers who are present could comment on the adequacy of the two kilometre road system. Having heard about the upgradings, having observed them obviously, and having heard both the objector and the applicant give us their professional opinion about the adequacy of the road access.
Sorry, my apologies. Onwards, Mr. McLean. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson there. With regard to access to the site, I visited the site with the planning officer on Thursday, the 19th of August, and during that time, they were actually undertaking the works, putting down the quarry crusher and the road planings while we were on site. So, I mean, when I first read some of the objectors' comments, I felt compelled to go and visit the site. But when I was driving up the access track to the site, I was pleasantly surprised with what I saw in terms of there was a number of places that vehicles could pass. I mean, we passed a number of private cars when we were heading up to the site, and there was also space for us to pass the excavator that was undertaking the works. And whilst we were on site, the dump truck was going up and down and continuing to undertake works there. So, I mean, from my perspective and my site visit, I was more surprised to see that the track was in a better condition than what had been portrayed in some of the objector comments. So in terms of the level of demand that the business is proposing, I mean, as the applicant had said, there was a number of courses that she'll be running, and then the likelihood of maybe one charity event that would attract possibly up to 20 horses or 20 horse boxes. I felt that there was sufficient capacity within the network, and I think, as the applicant has stated, it's not intended that there would be horse boxes going up and down the track every day. So I think from that perspective, I was fairly comfortable with the track that was provided, with the number of passing places and the likely demand that would be going up and down to the business site.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Connell, if you wish to make an additional comment, thank you.
Thank you, convener. Just to add to Mr. McLean's comments there, I too visited the site, although I did it quite recently, so the condition of the road wasn't as good as it obviously was when he and the case officer was there in the summer, but it was still in a reasonable condition. One of the things I would want to emphasise is just the number of properties that already are taking access off that road. It was referred to by both deputations, the number of new houses that are in. There are a lot of construction traffic going up and down, and even once that all finishes, there will be a number of properties taking access off the road. I mean, I know that I think it was Councillor Wilson asked the applicant to give an indication of the percentage of what traffic would be part of the business, and it was obviously just a guesstimate, but I would certainly endorse that this will be a very small business compared to the amount of traffic that will regularly be going up and down this access track. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Councillor Gray.
Thank you, convener. I've got to say I'm more than happy with the responses from Mr. McLean and Ms. Contliffe. They've completely answered the questions I had ready for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You have an additional question, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Convener. It's on a slightly separate subject, so I thought I would keep it separate. Spookily, Mrs. Conliffe has nearly answered it, but I still have a wee bit of concern about this road. As I say, I have, or the underneath of my car has personal experience of this road, and I too was very struck by the number of houses up what seemed to be a wee country track, and the amount of construction of fairly large houses. I just wonder if we have any information as to whether concern about this road was expressed and there's any conditions within the other housing with regards to maintenance of this road, or is it like all other private roads, one which we as an authority wash our hands of and leave it up to the residents to sort?
Mrs. Conliffe, could you answer the question, please? Thank you.
Yes, I'll come in first. I mean, Mr. McLean might want to add to it, but yes, there are a number of properties up there, and we've looked at each of them on their own merits when the application has come in. And as far as I'm aware, we don't get involved in terms of the private maintenance of the access, and therefore there wouldn't be any conditions. But what we would have been doing was looking at it to see if we thought that the access was suitable to allow for those residential developments to be built, in the same way as we've now looked at the access for this commercial development, and our view is that it is satisfactory. I don't know if Mr. McLean wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that was fairly comprehensive, and I'm quite happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Simpson, does that answer the question for you?
Well, I wonder if I might ask a supplementary question of Mr. McLean. I just wondered if you advise us what he was driving when he found the surface of a road. How enormous was his vehicle?
We were in one of the council pool cars, so it was a Fiesta, so it wasn't anything. It wasn't a 4x4 or anything like that. It was just one of our pool vehicles.
Yes, I know it wasn't your own car, though, Lachlan. But I think.
No, it wasn't. It was a pool vehicle.
What could you possibly referring to, Councillor Simpson? What could you possibly be meaning? Anyway, thank you for your questions. Councillor Reid, your question for officers, please.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to have some clarification exactly what is the situation with the private water supply. There seems to be two contradictory views from the applicant and the objectors. Thank you.
Mrs. Conliffe, do you wish to come in on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Reid. Yes, we do seem to have a bit of a conflicting view. What we have to deal with in terms of planning is all the information that has been submitted, and we have dealt with it in terms of that. There is a water borehole, and that clearly is used by the applicant for the water for her residential caravan. The remainder of the site is not utilising that water borehole, but rather for the holiday accommodation, it would appear that there's a water butt under the sink with the pump powered by the battery, and that is filled by the applicant from bottled water. And then there is the grey water, which is harvested from both the Dutch barn and also take water from the stream that is within her site, and that is used for all the stabling. So we have looked at all of that information, and we have passed it through environmental health, and we have had comments from our colleagues in private water, and you would see on our report of handling condition 8, which is with regard to safeguarding septic tanks, soakaways and private water, and also the two informatives advising of the details in terms of legislation identifying that development must have the wholesome water supply, and that is all controlled by environmental health. I'm not sure if Ms. Reid wants to answer anything further on that, but as far as we're concerned, we're satisfied that the proposal will be able to have satisfactory water.
Sorry, shaking your head there, Lynn, but do you have anything to add?
Thanks up. I have nothing further to add on that. The condition is sufficient to ensure that the private water supply is protected.
Okay, thank you. Let's answer your question, Councillor Reid.
Well, if I could just come back, Mr. Brown, I think, suggested that there was the legal or questioned the legality of the connection to the borehole. Do we know anything about that?
Just before I go to Mrs. Conliffe, as I was trying to work out, I think that's something that is actually a private legal matter. But if I go over to Mrs. Conliffe, maybe you can add a little bit more to that.
No, Convener, that was effectively what I was going to say. It would be a private legal matter between the applicant and the other owners in the area who have access to that borehole. I mean, certainly the objector has suggested that she doesn't have access legally, and the applicant has said she does have access legally, so it is very much between the two of them to sort out with regard to the legal process, not through the planning process at all.
Mr. Fogg, is that not really quite important for us making a decision?
Just 1 second, Councillor Reid, if I could let Mr. Fogg come in, as he has additional information, and then Mr. Smith, and then we'll come to yourself, back to yourself, Councillor Reid. So, Mr. Fogg, your answer, please.
Convener,
Excuse me, Convener. Actually, I don't have any information that's additional to the response you just had from Anne Conliffe. I wouldn't have offered the answer had I heard first from Anne. In answer to Councillor Reid, it's not relevant to the planning matter. It is indeed a separate private matter between those enjoying the rights, and it's not within the remit of this committee's considerations as to whether it's being improperly used by the applicant or any other party.
Okay, so that was an answer to Councillor Reid's sort of maybe second question. Mr. Smith, is your answer to do with Councillor Reid's second question regarding whether it is something that we as a planning committee should have information on?
Yeah, yes, it is, and it's maybe just again another general comment on that. And in very simple terms, there are other legislative controls which mean that this issue, similar to other issues, should not be replicated in the planning process. And any issues as to rights of access to water or to connect to private supplies or use private roads, etc., would be addressed via those other legislative controls. What we are looking at here is the appropriateness of a use of land in land use terms, not to consider or to confirm or to take a view on whether there are other rights that may well need to be addressed. So it's not something that we should be looking at because it's dealt with by other legislative means.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid, I do wish to come back to you because I did cut you off slightly. Did we get it right? Did that answer your question?
Not really, because I suppose my question is, if there was no private water supply, if there was no water supply at all, would that impact on our making a decision today?
I'm not quite sure who would need to answer that. I mean, it's the use of the land, I believe. So we're going to Mrs. Conliffe to answer that, or Mr. Smith, who would like to take that? Mrs. Conliffe, thank you.
Yes, I mean, even if there was no supply, there is often in the countryside, there are clearly a number of boreholes and potential for supply, but it would not be a reason for us to say no to a planning application, because as Mr. Smith has just outlined, it all comes under other legislation and be covered that way. So it wouldn't affect our decision making at this stage.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming, Mr. Smith, you're coming in with something similar.
Yeah, I think there's probably two parts there. One is, well, there is a supply in this case. If there wasn't a existing supply that could be connected to, we may well ask for information as to how an adequate and wholesome supply could be provided, but that's not the case here. In addition, I think I recall in the deputation from the applicant that she indicated that water supply for the commercial element or the horses per se was through rainwater harvesting. So the private water supply, from what she was saying, is not related to the commercial aspect, and there didn't seem to be any debate as to whether or not there is the opportunity to connect to the private water supply for the residential purposes. That would be the other element, and that would be associated to the caravan, if that clarifies.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Do we have any further questions for officers? No, we have Councillor Wilson coming forward with the motion, so over to you, Councillor Wilson.
Thanks very much, Convener. I read the report on this application last night again, particularly carefully. I thought it was a well-structured and well laid out report that dealt with all the planning issues adequately that had been raised by objectors. That's my first comment. My second one is sometimes these contentious applications are difficult for us, but having, I'd say, read the paperwork and had questions and listened to the debate and listened carefully to both the objector and the applicant, I'm going to move a motion that we approve the paper that's before us. It's unfortunate if any of these applications lead to difficult behaviour, but that's not what we're here to deal with. We're here to deal with a planning application, and it would seem to me, in summary, Forum Convener, that this application is about what is an if you like, a countryside and agricultural type basis in what is obviously a rural area of countryside. There's been reference to new houses being built further up the road. We've implicated in that as a planning authority. We've given consent for these. They wouldn't be there otherwise. Therefore, having taken cognizance of that, I think that this, on balance, the proposals here, which are quite innovative and will have a job creation, economic environment, economic development aspect to them, and also provide for the horse fraternity, and I don't pretend to know much about it, Convener, a facility that's different and quite innovative. And for that, I think it should be encouraged. I would hope that if we do give consent today, that everyone concerned on site can settle down, if I can put it that way, and get to live compatibly. There will be problems to resolve, there will be issues to resolve, I'm quite sure, but they'll be better resolved by kindness and gentleness and negotiation rather than anything else, and I would hope that that would be the case. And if we do approve it, I would hope that the business gently but firmly prospers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. On my chat function coming forward, I have Councillor James coming in at 11:29 to second the motion and Councillor McEwen at 11:30. So as per that, I'm going to give it to Councillor James to second the motion. But Councillor McEwen, please, if you wish to make your second into comments, I'd be more than happy to hear that. Councillor James, you seconded the motion, please.
Thanks very much, Convener, and sorry for Tom. Thanks to Tom for actually going to second this. What can you say after you follow Councillor Wilson? Everything, I agree with everything that Councillor Wilson has just said. This is a rural business, and it's actually in the centre of my ward, Strathtay. I think a lot of the worries of the objectors can be put to rest. There's not going to be hundreds and hundreds of horse boxes, because the livery for 8 horses, you're not going to be up there moving them twice a day, every day of the year. So horse box movement's going to be very limited. The service that Miss Inkster is going to provide, I think, is excellent. I was going to declare an interest, but don't think I need to, because it's not directly related to this. But I am a director of a horse charity that does provide or use animal intervention for learning and mental health issues, and I think anything you can do for animal welfare should be commended. This is in a rural location, which is where you'd expect to find a rural business. Horses, 23 acres. I'm glad to see this come forward. I'm very happy to second Councillor Wilson's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Before we get to comments which are coming in thick and fast, I do have to just ask if there is an amendment. No. Thank you very much indeed. Then, Councillor McEwen, as I say, apologies that you're slightly late on the seconding, but if you would like to make a comment, I'm happy for you to do so.
Yes, I've never managed to propose or second a motion on planning yet, and I think actions are supposed to be slower, because I certainly typed in my second before Councillor James's point. There you go. That's the broadband across the loch must be a lot better than mine, Ian. So there you go. But no, I agree wholeheartedly with both the proposer and the seconder of this motion, and in the comments that they've made. I think what is left for me to add to that is that I think the breakup of the estate here has provided different opportunities for different people, and I think this opportunity for this lady to start a very useful rural business in a rural area near to Dunkeld in Ward 5 here is an appropriate use of the land, and I hope she's successful, and can base ourselves there, because I think it'll be an asset to the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKeon. Councillor Gray, your comments, please.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Ms Inkster for her outstanding presentation, which really fulsomely covered the ground and gave a clear picture of the situation, to my mind. As we all know, developments in the countryside which are for new enterprises are extremely rare. Generally speaking, when a farm is vacated or developed into housing, and the next development we see is a bigger farm setting somewhere nearby because the farmer has sold that for development, and no further opportunities are made out of this. Therefore, when I see a small nursery private business starting up, I would give it every support. If it's in a rural area where they should be, it should be a priority that we approve such things. Make sure they are rurally necessitated and let them go ahead where the chances can be found, because they are so rarely found. And the countryside is more than a place to live in, it is a place to work in as well. We must remember that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Simpson.
You've come back from the black hole of Dunblane, Nick and Vera.
I didn't realise I was away. My apologies.
That's twice you've been away, Convener.
Yes,
We're counting.
Now, thank you, Convener. I think I'm looking at the wider context that's been discussed today. I think we can all learn a lesson from today, and when giving permission in future or considering application in future for what I would describe as large bits of suburbia stuck in the middle of the countryside, that we remember, and in fact Councillor Tom Gray is quite correct, remember that the countryside is the place for country businesses and for country businesses first. And if people choose to live in a suburban house up a country lane, they perhaps need to be perhaps cognizant that they are in the countryside, and that other activities which may not be what you would find in suburbia are going to be there. I think it's a lesson for us all in future when applications come before us.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no further comments, so the application is approved. Thank you. Can I just make a comment? First of all, just on my internet, I want to go on record just letting you know that I can still hear the debate that's going on, even though I might freeze. Hence the reason I'm putting my camera off. But I'm still here. Don't forget about me. That's all I'm saying. Okay, we will move on to the next application, which is the erection of 2 dwelling houses and garages of a revised design and land southwest of 16 Curate Wynd in Kinross. And if I could ask Mr. Sean Panton to speak to the report. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you, Convener. As stated, this application is for a revised design for 2 dwelling houses. The site was granted planning permission in principle in February 2019 for a residential development. A subsequent detailed planning application for 2 dwelling houses was then approved in September 2021. This current application therefore seeks to slightly amend the design of the 2 dwelling houses that were approved in September of last year. The changes involve the addition of roof lights to enable the formation of habitable accommodation within the roof space. No changes to the overall height of the buildings from that previously approved are proposed. Additionally, the garage on plot 2 is to be lengthened by 1 metre. It is worth noting that if the permission granted in 2021 was constructed and occupied, the dwelling houses would then benefit from permitted development rights, which would enable the installation of the roof light windows and the formation of the habitable accommodation within the roof space. The proposal before you today would therefore ultimately be permitted development should the changes have been implemented once the dwelling houses were completed. The application is before you today because it is now sought to include these changes at this stage rather than wait until the development is completed. This fallback position has considerable weight in the determination of this application. I'll now take you through a variety of slides which seek to illustrate the proposal in more detail. Next slide, please. Firstly, we have a satellite image where the location is shown in red. As seen, the site is located in close proximity to the town centre of Kinross. It is worth noting that the site is not located within the Kinross Conservation Area, however, is immediately adjoining it. Next slide, please. Next, we have a site plan showing the proposal in greater detail and also its relationship to Curate Wind to the right. No changes to the site plan are proposed from the 2021 approval other than the increase in length of the garage on plot 2 by 1 metre. I will now move to a series of recent photographs taken. This first image shows Curate Wind when viewed from the south looking north. The site is to the left of the photograph in the area of land behind the hedge which you can just make out behind the caravan. Next slide, please. Again, this image is of Curate Wind when viewed from the south looking north. This is just slightly further up the road from the previous photograph. You will see there is a bollard which restricts vehicular movement along this section of the road. The access to the site is obtained to the north, approximately where the white car in the distance is located. Next slide, please. This image now shows the access to the site from Curate Wind in greater detail. To give you your bearings, the next photograph will be taken into the site from this access point. Next slide, please. Here we see the view when looking directly into the site from the access on Curate Wind. You can see plot 1 in the distance, which has now been partially constructed. Some of the roof lights under question can just be made out in this shot. Next slide, please. This is another photograph when viewed from the access. In this shot, you can just make out plot 2 in the distance behind plot 1. Again, this plot has also now been partially constructed. Next slide, please. Moving away from the site to the north along Curate Wind, this image shows the site when looking back. You'll be able to make out the roofs of both plots in the centre of the photograph, just behind the lamppost. Next slide, please. This final shot now shows the dwelling houses when viewed from another point to the north. This photograph shows a better context of what lies to the west of the development, with the west being to the right of the image. I will now move to some elevation drawings. This first drawing shows the elevations and part floor plan of plot 1. The changes to the 2021 permission are highlighted through the red bubbles. As seen, the changes proposed are relatively minor. Next slide, please. This second drawing shows the elevations and part floor plan of plot 2. Again, the changes to the 2021 permission are highlighted through the red bubbles. I will now leave you with this drawing and thank you, convener. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Panton. Do we have any questions for officers on the application? Please put your cue in the box now. Councillor Williams, Councillor Waters.
Thank you.
Then to Councillor Williams.
Just how much of this application is retrospective, given that we can see the windows already in situ, and should that not have been mentioned in the papers? And can I have a subsequent question as well, please, convener?
Certainly, if Mr. Panton, if you could answer the first question, and then we'll go back to Councillor Waters. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Councillor Waters. So in answer to your question, the houses are at a stage now where the roofs are on and the roof lights are in. There's still significant building works to be undertaken. However, it is worth pointing out that the footprint of the buildings is consistent with the 21 permission. So when they started construction on this property, on both plots, there was no breach of planning control because they were building in accordance with the 2021 approval. When they got to the putting the roof stage on, that's when they then incorporated the accommodation on the upper floor and incorporated the roof lights. And it was the developer's understanding that because this would be permitted development once the development was completed, they were permitted to do this during construction stage. However, this was obviously brought to our attention, and this is not the case. Permitted development rights only kick in when the development is completed. So that is why we have got the application before us today, so that the developer, if approved, can now do this rather than wait until the development is completed and then do the works retrospectively.
Okay, and Mr. Smith, sorry, that was my fault. I pressed my mute button. Mr. Smith, you wish to come in?
Yeah, just clarifying there. So I think during the processing of the application, Councillor Waters, it's the roof lights have been installed, so that element is retrospective. In addition, I think and maybe Sean can clarify that the garage is also under construction again, and it's 1 metre extended form, so they're partially retrospective, which has happened during the processing of the application. But as we've said, if this was undertaken after the house that was originally approved was completed, the works would be permitted development and would not require, or the works associated to the roof lights would be permitted development, would not require any permission from the planning authority.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters, your second question.
Yeah, that would require the house to be built to the original planning application, which is obviously not happening as it is just now. Just in regarding the amenity of the neighbours, this site is kind of surrounded by houses reasonably close in all directions, and a lot of consideration in the first cut application was given to the amenity of the residents, but this seems to undermine quite considerably that amenity. Has any work been done to look at that amenity, bearing in mind that the developer isn't developing these houses to the original planning application? So
yeah, no, I'm happy to go to Mr. Panton. The developer is developing the house to the original specification as far as foot size is concerned. I just want to be clear on that. There's been no increase other than the garage to size or anything. So I just want to be clear on that. Mr. Panton, if you want to come in and answer the question, please.
Yeah, thank you, convener. As you were just saying there, the houses themselves, in terms of their size, in terms of their overall footprint and height, have not changed since the 2021 permission. So what you were saying regarding amenity to neighbouring receptors, this was all considered under the 2021 application, which has been approved. So in terms of amenity, what we now need to look at is, are these additional windows going to increase overlooking to the neighbouring properties that would be so significantly greater than the previous application that we cannot support? And on looking at this application, we do not consider that the roof lights or increasing the garage by 1 metre is going to be of significant detriment to the amenity of neighbours from that previously approved. So hopefully that answers your question.
Mr. Smith, you also have additional information if required. I don't know if it is required, but please come in.
Yeah, just clarifying that in terms of, we feel that there is no significant impact on amenity resulting from the installation of these roof lights. Indeed, they could be installed under permitted development once the house, which was originally approved, excluding those roof lights, without the requirement for planning permission, those permitted development rights dealing with matters which should not come before the planning authority for consideration by and large, and which are deemed wholly acceptable. So these roof lights, which are in the roof face of the window, should not result in unacceptable overlooking. That's not to say that there wouldn't be a change in the level of overlooking, just not any unacceptable overlooking given the nature of roof lights and how they serve rooms within roof space.
Okay. Thank you.
Just supplementary. I still not sure. You know, that this house is obviously part of this as retrospective as agreed. So it has to still be dealt with as an application in itself, and the fact that the permitted development could come back if they built the house to the original planning permission is not happening. And planning is a lot more than just a footprint in the ground. There's a lot of elements taken in, and I think the concern with a lot of residents, and my concern, is very much based around the amenity of the individuals around. And from the plans that I can see in front of me, the they're not roof lights that are high up in a room. They're low, so the sight lines going into people's gardens and looking into people's windows will be increased quite significantly. And I think that is a fundamental change from the initial planning permission. So I am a little bit concerned about this.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Waters. I think, and I was certainly going to go to Mr. Smith and to Mr. Panton, but I think they're saying that they have assessed that they have taken into consideration that your concern that they're maybe lower and there might be an issue with overlooking onto houses. They've taken that into consideration and seen no reason to be concerned with this change. But if I could go to Mr. Smith and Mr. Panton for the answer, please.
Yeah, I'd maybe give us a scenario to explore maybe Councillor Waters' concern. If the committee felt that these roof lights were not acceptable and refused planning permission for them, the developer would have to slate those areas, build the house exactly as they're building it at the moment, and then on the day they got their completion, put the roof lights in, which would be permitted development. But notwithstanding that, we have assessed the impact of overlooking. There's no change to sunlight and daylight because the building is exactly the same. We've assessed the impact of the roof lights in terms of overlooking, and we are happy that the impacts associated to that are within acceptable parameters. So I'm not sure if that gives you any further clarity, Councillor Waters.
Thank you. Mr. Panton, do you have additional information?
It was just to echo really the first point you'd made there, Councillor Waters. You're absolutely correct that every application has to be determined on its own merits, and we need to take everything into consideration. However, in this instance, it is a material consideration that the buildings themselves have already been approved. So that does have significant weight in the determination, but I just wanted to make clear that you are correct that every application does need to be determined on its own merits.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any additional questions for officers? No, there's nothing coming through. Okay, so do we have a mover for the motion? I'm happy to do so. I'm happy to move this this application. I think it's been well discussed here that the concerns that many residents have, local residents have regarding this development, but this has planning permission. This development already has planning permission, and the lights being put in, the window lights being put into the roof would be able to be done anyway. That doesn't mean that we don't look at it. That doesn't mean that we don't reassess it. That's exactly why we should look at this. That's exactly why we should do it. We should make sure that these are okay. And that has been assessed and that has been done. So I'm happy that everything meets the planning regulations, and I'm happy to approve these amendments. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, convener, I'm sorry I've lost the chat box function for a moment, but I'm happy to second your motion for approval.
Thank you. I thought it was only me that was experiencing IT issues, but thank you very much indeed, Councillor Wilson. Is there an amendment? No, then in that case, the application is approved. Thank you very much indeed. And Councillor Robertson, you wish to make a comment, please do.
Yes, I just would like to, I can fully understand the comments that Councillor Waters made with regard to this application, because local people who live round about it were really concerned to see what was happening. But the fact of the matter is that the houses actually already have planning consent. And as the officers have clearly said, that once they were built, the developer was quite entitled through the permitted development to put in roof lights should he wish. So the battle was actually lost some time ago, and we have to accept that. And it's just it's unfortunate if two buildings are put on that site that's going to cause upset and affect the quality of life of people living round about them.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments from councillors? No, thank you very much indeed. The application is approved, and that brings us on to the last item of business, which is a proposal of application notice. My favourite part of the process. This is for a plan for an installation of a 32 megawatt solar farm and 16 megawatt battery storage facilities and associated infrastructure at Keithick Farms Limited, Keithick in Blair Gowrie. And councillors, if you'd like to come forward now by just putting an indication in the chat function, and then you can ask the officers, raise the points that your issues are concerned about, and we'll pass that on for them to look at when the application finally comes through. Councillor Wilson, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, convener, that worked that time. I had a question, but maybe I'll combine the question with my comments, if that's okay. These are going to be with us for some time. Similar applications as part of the new regime for providing power, and I just wondered about two things. Well, let me deal with the issues that are on the paper first. I think on page 71, para 19A, visual impact, including noise, lighting, glint and glare, I think is a particular consideration given the close proximity of quite a number of domestic properties. Over the page, there's a combination of flood risk and drainage assessment. It's pretty near the Isla. And we know what happens there on occasions. So I think that's particularly important. And I think that would affect the water resources and soils as well, in particular in relation to the site. What the landscape and visual impact assessment kind of fits in with, that's on page 72, para 20, I think the 6th or 7th dot down, and obviously tree and woodland survey. So these are the things that I particularly would want planners to look at in detail, but I wonder if the other one is the impacts on core paths and tourist routes. I don't know the area well enough. There are paths clearly on the plans and the maps that we've got, convener. Is that a particular issue that the planners have already identified? And what about the extent of woodland that will be affected by this? It's not entirely clear from what we've got, but that'll maybe I'll be told that's coming up later in future applications. But these two things as well are of a concern of mine. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Panton does want to come in with an answer. I don't normally encourage that at this point, Sean, but I'm happy if you've got a specific answer you want to give to any of the points raised. But normally, if councillors just do that, we can look at it at application time. But Sean, if there's something you wish to say, please do.
Yes, thank you, convener. No, it was just to say that obviously this is a proposal of application notice. So until such time that the formal application is submitted, we don't know if they're planning to redirect the core path, what their plans are with that, how close they'll be to the woodland. So it was just to kind of make that point clear that we will be assessing all of this, but we just don't know the details yet because this is only a proposal of application notice. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. No, absolutely. I do encourage this quite vehemently. I do like that councillors put across the issues that they can foresee coming forward. I'm very happy with the way that the planning team assess all the applications when they come through. I know they do a thorough job, but it does give the local residents and the local councillors a chance to highlight the points that they would be concerned about that might need maybe a little bit of extra information. So thank you very much, Sean, for that, and thank you, Councillor Wilson, for the issues that you're raising. Councillor Illingworth, could you put your comments across, please, to officers?
Great. Thank you, convener. Two comments, if I may. As I say, with all these battery power, they're contained or they're stored in fairly unattractive containers, so I think it's important that they're screened effectively. And the second one is I think the technology is changing all the time. These batteries are only supposed to last 10 or 15 years. And along with any solar farm, the technology is changing very, very quickly. And I think there should be consideration given to a cleanup plan a cleanup plan for the end of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Illingworth. Councillor McEwen, your comments for officers, please.
Thank you very much. I think the thing I know about Cooperanga, some of the ward to the south of me, is that it has a huge cycling community, and which cross this development, and these are the safe places. 94 itself, and it connects up lots of things. The ward councillor has many a time on his wheels. The access to it, but also runners and etc. Because obviously there will be movements to this site for not just the construction of it, etc. And it's just making sure that these facilities in the area for recreation for local residents and for the wider community are maintained and remain safe, because obviously cycling along a rural road that's the fields other side of it is completely different when you start adding in any sort of activity like this. It may have an impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, and Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, convener. This is in my ward, and it's part of a number of similar applications for installations of this nature. And I have one concern that's been brought up to me by a number of constituents, is that the pre-application process was all done online. Now, I've heard of COVID. I know the problems associated with COVID, but I think given the huge size of this particular project and the local concerns, I really feel they need to consider putting on an actual event. I know from the meetings that we attend, peering at screens is all very well to decide what's happening where, but when it's in your community, I think to have a proper audiovisual display on boards in a hall is essential. And one thing about Cooperanga is it's awash with public buildings you could have suitable for one of these events. So I don't think it's on for now where COVID is reasonably controlled. I don't think it's reasonable to have only online consultation events. I think the time has come to put on some proper events where you can see the whole enormity of the project, particularly in conjunction with all the many others that are proposed in the Cooperangus area.
Okay, thank you. I will say on that, my understanding is that two events have done. Yes, granted, they have been online. I'm not 100% sure what our officers can do to request that that the applicant do another. But certainly, you've raised your point very eloquently, and I understand that is a community concern. I'm sure if our officers can do something, they will. Mr. Smith, you are putting a comment there, so maybe you're thinking along the same lines as me, I don't know, but maybe you've got something else to add. Your comment, please.
Yeah, just pointing out that the regulations associated to the pre-application consultation process are set by Scottish Government, and there are interim arrangements in place to deal with COVID-related matters, and those interim arrangements allow for the approach that's being taken. So we are bound by the legislation, as Sean's saying in the chat there, and we cannot force to work out with the legislation unless that we feel that is absolutely necessary.
Yes, thank you for that, and I will come back to you, Councillor Simpson. Sorry, I'm having difficulties articulating today, my apologies. I'm hopeful that maybe the applicant might be listening and maybe they might be willing to go beyond the legislation at this time. But I do take on board what the officers are saying, that they cannot enforce that. But Councillor Simpson, you wish to make an additional comment?
Well, thank you, convener. You've read my mind in certain respects. I hope the developer is listening. And I think the message to all developers is don't just do the minimum. Please go that extra mile. If this project is as good as it's as the developers would maintain it's going to be, then it is incumbent on them to do a good selling job. And I think you do a better selling job by going the extra mile to compensate with the consultation. I realise there's a limit to what our officers can do, but I think if the developers are listening, it's an opportunity for them to sell themselves to the local community rather than do the bare minimum. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Simpson, and thank you to officers. Yeah, I think it's no surprise to everybody that I seriously like this part of the process. I think it is the part where the community can actually engage with it and actually get online right at the beginning, put their concerns and their issues across and have them addressed throughout the whole process. I have done everything I can in the last 5 years to try and promote this. I have mentioned it time and time again that everybody is sick fed up of hearing it. So I hope that your words, Councillor Simpson, do get back to the developer and the applicant, and maybe they will do a little bit more. That is the end of business in front of us today. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, and we'll look forward to seeing you in March. Thank you.